All right, welcome to Studies in the Bible, and we are in Proverbs, picking up once again in Proverbs chapter 5. The message of Proverbs chapter 5 is quite simple, really. Avoid adultery. Um, Beginning in the first 6 verses, we see that attention to instruction avoids adultery. Verses 1 and 2 introduce the instruction of a father to a son as a formula of the wisdom literature. So, this is the way that Proverbs were often written, and it is used here. The call is to carefully heed the father's words so as to be discreet. In other words, properly conduct yourself, and also to preserve knowledge. What knowledge? The knowledge of the dangers of adultery. Verses 4 to 6 give the reasons why. Although an adulterous person's words are sweet and persuasive, um, they lead to destruction. And although the one being addressed here is a son, and the reference is to a woman, both sexes can be lulled into adultery. Both can be um, deceived by sweet words. But the instruction we're given here in Proverbs is that those sweet words end in bitterness. Um, some translations say gall, which was a drink that was extremely bitter and often made from wormwood. But if other translations say literally wormwood, and the meaning is the same, uh, bitter, very bitter. And the word also became associated with someone who is bitter in spirit, and that's the double meaning here. The double-edged sword uh, is a symbol of destruction, and her ways lead to the grave, which of course symbolizes death. Um, you could say the destruction of one's life and one's character, but the symbol of death is being used here. So if we move further on to verses 7 to 14, we see a similar pattern. We see a repeating of the call to carefully heed the words and avoid the adulterous person. And in verse 9 to 14, we are given further reasons why. That in doing this, we give our strength to one who is cruel. A person who is not part of your family, a stranger, they would not have the same vested interest in you, and so could very likely act in ways which would be cruel. And the modern version of this, at least in our culture, is the high cost of divorce and literally seeing your wealth going to others, going to lawyers, and ultimately also going to other families. So that is one reason to avoid adultery. The other is the profound regret for a life poorly lived and shame as it is witnessed by the community. And so the instructor here, the father, is encouraging people to consider the consequences of their actions. And this is a repetitive strain in the entire book of Proverbs. The call to wisdom is a call to properly contemplate the implications of your actions. And so while the adulterous uh, woman or man is looks good and sounds good and is very tempting, we need to take the long view and realize the consequences of infidelity and avoid them at all cost. If we continue on now to the latter half of the chapter, beginning in verse 15, we see that water is used as a symbol to symbolize sex, but also fertility, um, person's own self, and we're encouraged to drink from our own well and not that of others. And basically, what's being said here is marriage protects people and allows for flourishing and strength to be kept from strangers. That when we keep our sexual energies within a marriage, then we are building something positive and profound rather than dispersing our strength to others. Verses 18 and 19 are a blessing and a hope that true enjoyment and captivation would be found in the arms of your wife. And this is a blessing from God. Healthy marriages are the foundation of society, communities, and even nations. And so strong marriages are profoundly important. And a gift from God. God has created sex to be enjoyable, life giving, and so um, this blessing that you would find a quenching of your thirst in your marriage is stated here. And then finally, he closes with another one final warning, and that is the warning not to be captivated by one who is not your spouse, and gives further reasons. And the first and most important is that God sees all. He sees our behavior. The stuff that might be hidden from the view of others is laid bare to him, and also the consequences of sin. And that is, sin leads to bondage and ultimately to spiritual death. And so that is the lesson of Proverbs chapter 5. Again, very simple: avoid adultery. And in contrast to that, rather be captivated by your own spouse, that you might live a fruitful life as you build a life together. So that's Proverbs chapter 5 in a nutshell. We will look at Proverbs 6 next week.